Welcome back. Next on our agenda is the CEO and co-founder from Bikal UK. Please welcome, and yes, you can use some applause emojis as you know now, Mr. Raj Sandhu to present you applied AI loan processing. Raj, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Oman Data Park and Oman Banking Association for inviting us to this, and obviously thank you for all the guests that are logged in and listening to this virtual session. So I'll give a brief background of who we are, but ultimately that's our message there. We're using HPC and AI to disrupt banking inefficiencies. Okay, so we are a UK company that's basically been started in 2009. We're a product development company, and then we work with partners like Oman Data Park to deliver our particular solutions. And if you know, obviously the UK in any sense, we come out of Coventry, which is traditionally a manufacturing sector. And the idea of today is to show you how we create our methodology, right? How we create our methodology of how we actually deliver these disruptive technologies that everybody's talking about these days, and how we work with Oman Data Park. I think that's the key sector as well, is our partnership with them is there for the benefit of the banking association and banking sector in Oman, and perhaps even further than the GCC. Okay, so our locations, we're very strong in the GCC. We've been there for many years. Obviously, we have a European presence as well as a UK. But as a product company, we work solely with partners. So our product is supported locally. We have a local contact. We have a local training. But we do interact with the end user. That is very important for us, because that way we can actually support what the end problem is that the customer has. This is us, just to give you a brief overview. Obviously myself, we have a very distinguished CTO who sits with us in the UK, and we have a regional officer in the form of Satish Vasu, who is 25 years in the Middle East, and so knows the Oman market well as the other regions as well. But we also have senior, if you like, advisory and governance board members, two prominent lawyers who help to basically guide the company through some of the regulatory and compliance, especially when it comes to the banking sector and data. Right, data is the oil, but it needs regulation. Right, it needs many safeguards. Okay, so I won't have to read all this, but basically what we do, this is our methodology. We find a problem. We have obviously domain experts. So these are people with historical knowledge, historical experience, working in the banking sector, largely in the UK. So with Lloyds, with RBS, with NatWest, with Barclays. They've retired now, but they still have 30 years of experience of the banking sector. We then use them and basically approach the industry sector, because they can relate to those people who are currently in that work, in that job. And then we also leverage universities as well. Okay, so a lot of our technology will come from university research, but all of this is underpinned by the high performance compute. Okay, so we're not into the hyperscale. We work with someone like Oman Data Park, who have that regional locality, unlike the big tech that will give you a very generalized, whatever they're using in Silicon Valley, they will put into Oman as well. With Oman Data Park, we can actually be more bespoke and bring in the local, if you like, cultures and laws and other sort of methodologies that the bank will have for that region. So obviously you've seen all the technology offerings. The idea of today is, obviously I know there's a big IT delegation listening in on this. We're trying to give you a bit of an overview, not just of the technology, but also of the actual application. So obviously Mr. Hassan has banking experience. He's talked about technology. The ODP does have internal domain expertise as well. So how do you use these technologies to actually create something that works for the bank, right? That's what the idea of today's presentation and of what our solution is. Okay, so as I said before, we have many domain expertise in different sectors. It's important to know that even something that we might produce in oil and gas may have an application in finance and banking. And likewise, anything in finance and banking may have an application in transportation and logistics. Okay, science is very universal. Behavior patterns of humans are very generic, right? Whatever behavior patterns you have in different industries, you can apply them to different sectors as well. But the idea is with the new technologies and new open source, you can bespoke these. So here gives you a bit of an overview of our domain experts. Again, you'll be able to get a closer look at this. But if you look in the top right-hand corner, you have somebody who has insurance and banking, fraud domain expertise, over 20 years of experience. So he doesn't know necessarily the ins and outs, the detail of IT, but we train him on what AI can do, what HPC can do, what blockchain can do, and then he will help our feature engineers to say, well, look, you can make it very technology rich, but the bank will never use this, especially if a bank is 20, 30 years old in the UK or even older. Yeah, he knows how to deal with cultures. How do you bring in a product where you only start with 2% of the data first and show the internal, get that internal buy-in to say, look, over time, this will give savings. That's where these guys will help us do that feature engineering and work as a what do you call it, like a mediator between the technology and the banking sector. Okay, the domain expert is very crucial for us. So how we work, we look at a problem statement, a specific one. We don't say we're going to take customer call center as one problem. We break that down into more problems, and the idea is all our technology should pay for itself. Okay, and we'll show you in a second how we do that. But the idea is, what is the cost of a problem? What is the data points for that problem, and what domain experts do we have? Yeah, that first assessment is what we look at, and you'll see in the loan applications, a lot of that comes from the initial step all the way through to the end journey. Okay, and so we have research partners, as I mentioned. These are the types of universities. At the moment, we are talking to Sahar University, so we can localize a lot of our research as well. University of Kent has a lot of the work that we're doing around law enforcement, Swansea around legal tech, and then Kyoto University. I know it's not UK, but we are working with them out in Japan for some behavioral and influential behavioral science. So we have the whole, if you like, collaboration, not just with ODP, but also with the in-country value vision that Oman has. We are talking to Oman Tel Hub, okay, through the UK Embassy in Muscat, who's basically been very instrumental in what we're doing in Oman and getting that message across. Yeah, whatever message we have or whatever product we have in the UK, it's not a copy and paste. Okay, we have to adjust it, we have to localize it, we have to have feedback from Oman Data Park and obviously through their customer channels as well. Okay, so we're very focused in terms of knowledge transfer, not necessarily product transfer. Okay. So this is how we operate, right? This is the stage we're operating. Now, this will be, I think, different perhaps to how the banking sector in Oman has worked, and even banking sector in the UK. This has been something that we've been working on. The TRL level basically is the technology readiness level. So it's a scale developed by NASA, right? So when they had to go to space, they had to invent things that are new, that are not available. And so the university research is 1 to 3, okay? And a full developed product is 7 to 9, all right? 4, 5, 6, 7 is where we come in. We're taking the university research and we basically develop it according to obviously what the requirement is, and then it becomes a ready-made product. We think this is the most efficient way for any bank to involve not only solving their problem, but also in terms of what the bank's aim is in terms of their profitability. So you may have a commercial bank that is looking at obviously corporate loans. You may have a personal bank that's looking at residential and domestic loans, or you have the combination of the two. But that application should fit what the bank's aims are. The application that you have for commercial should not just be used with different GUI. You need to have a different behavioral science in there. And that's where we come in. That's what we work with each bank for, to make sure that they get their own advantage and their own differentiation. Okay, so as we mentioned, HPC partner is Oman Data Park. I think many benefits, which Mr. Hassan explained before. Everyone will know HPC is not cheap, but the idea of cloud is you can have you can share your cost. Okay, you're not necessarily putting your data with other people's, but the processing power and the way that the banking sector works, and especially in the loan applications, you don't necessarily need to have real time. So you can schedule, you can batch process your data and have it delivered in such a way at such a time that's convenient to you, and obviously negotiate that with Oman Data Park as well. So there may be a quiet period of the week where all the loan applications can be processed, and that window is a lot cheaper than perhaps doing it on a Sunday morning when more clients are lined up for processing. So Oman Data Park, they understand HPC very well. We've been working with them for over about a year, I think, with Mr. Sukhwinder Singh, and understanding obviously what they know in terms of HPC and what obviously we can bring. So it's very complementary partnership for the country as well. Okay, so now I'll talk about the loan application itself. So hopefully you get an understanding of how we operate. Here's the problem, right? Here's the outline of what we think is the issue in Oman. 38% obviously we've got there is personal loans, so big figure there, number of loans that are happening. You've also got, I think, an emerging economy. So the idea is that the banking sector is part of the country's growth. So obviously the banks will have a mandate, if you like, to help the local residents to achieve growth, to achieve a better standard of living, to take advantage of all the sort of things that that society and then economics can provide, and for the banking sector to be part of the business and part of the economy as well. So obviously there's non-government loans as well. So most of this is obviously all private loans. And so what you've got within that, you've got non-performing loans. So to the IT guys, obviously you're part of this. This obviously goes into the operations side, but there's a non-performing loans that when the decision on a loan is made over a course of its life, it will be there's obviously a potential to become non-performing. And so these are some of the figures that we've got based on what the cost is overall for the banks when a loan becomes into default. And as a percentage, that's where Oman sits within the sort of GCC area. Now, this is obviously taken from a pre-COVID situation, and there are obviously data now available in terms of post-COVID. So when it comes to those data points, which Khalid mentioned earlier on the call with Hassan, in terms of big data, yes, you've got social media, you've got all these other aspects of data. But when you have something like a pandemic, an economic situation such as in 2008, those macro events will create data points as well. Yeah, and that's where AI is going to be its most effective. So as I mentioned, you've got some data here from Fitch. Now these spikes are going to be global, right? But purely because of what's happened in 2020. Obviously, the risk is different to a financial crash, but the way that data obviously can be used, not just during the pandemic, but coming out the pandemic. Right. So is there expenditure, or are there loan requirements that were going to be taken up in 2020, but customers didn't take them because obviously they weren't going to work? There was lockdown. So there's positives and minuses to this. Is that yes, there will be some default problems, but again, everybody had those. But there'll also be opportunity as well. Okay, so getting that risk element is what we're going to try and do with AI to achieve that. So from a very basic diagram, I know this is very, very basic. This is not exactly how the banking sector will work, but we've basically taken an idea. This is what the loan application process is, and obviously at the moment, in most instances, this is manual. Okay, so there's what they call is moral hazard, right? So you have internal people. In one day, that same application may get a different result. There's no consistency, or there's no standardization in that result. And then when you combine it with all the other data and you become a checklist, then it can be difficult. The 2019 criteria to 2020 criteria has changed, but the bank needs to update that within their systems, train a lot of people, which is very difficult to do, especially if everybody's working from home as well. So can AI provide a more efficient loan application process? We think it can. Okay, so that gives an overview, okay, of the problem statement. Like I say, you have a risk assessment. You have two types of communication. You have a chat bot, you have a call-in center, and then you have rejection and approved. How do you deal with all of these separate interactions with your customer base, right? So this is not just an IT situation. This is obviously a claims, default, application. All those sectors in the bank have to interact in such a way so that they can provide the best decision for their customer. And not necessarily today, if the loan is approved or rejected today, does that customer's profile then change so that the bank can then obviously make sure that they hold on to that customer for later on? Again, if it's a manual process, it's very hard to determine that. We want to show you how AI can help the bank improve that efficiency and in communication with the bank as well. So non-performing loans, right? So you have two problems. The loan application itself, in terms of that, is obviously very human interaction heavy, and the non-performing loans as well. So with 2020, the way it's obviously gone, will that impact Oman banks? Of course. Will it impact global banking? Definitely, right? I don't think there's no corner of the world that had an issue. But the question is, how do we get out of this now? How do we make sure that we use the time now, using the technologies that are available in country as well, to reduce the problem, right? And make it better over time. So this is what we think is our approach to this. Okay, so here you've got obviously ourselves, you've got the domain experts, and what we basically do is we work with the head of risk, loan application, customer services, and if you have a head of AI or data science, that would help. But basically through this, we want to create a trial, right? We need to have these people on board internally, as well as obviously the IT people as well, to help manage this, and then we work with the bank to actually create a trial based on their historic data, right? So you've got the data points. We need access to the data points, not directly, but obviously within country with the right credentials. And then from that, we can actually start looking at the types of technologies which I mentioned to you earlier. So for instance, Khalid, you mentioned from Elisa Bank, you mentioned about the AI use of big data in social media. So again, you can API into that, right? That's things that we have done before. You have to get permissions. You have to talk to obviously the social media providers, but you're right, it's a rich source of data. I'm sure later on they'll talk about fraud, and you've had instances in the UK where people will apply for loans for cars, but then they'll spend it on a holiday. Is that something you can go and check and make sure that people are allowed to change their mind? But that data then helps you to give a risk analysis of the loan that's been given, and other information in terms of obviously the house that they buy. If they get a house loan, did they buy the house that they said they were going to buy, or did they buy a bigger one, or did they buy a small? You see what I mean? All those details, you need to be able to you need to use those data to assess the risk that your loan will have over its lifetime, not just on day one, but over its lifetime. And obviously, you have here in the bottom right the job, right? How so the last year affected many people in terms of their work. And so how do you apply that in terms of data as well? We think using smart contracts, using blockchain, using a hyperledger, especially if you're going to have the opportunity to put that data in a cloud setting like Oman Data Park, we believe there's a way to use data from one bank to the other so that the banking sector as a whole doesn't lose, let alone the individual banks. So that could be from a fraud application, but it could just be from a bad loan application, right? Sometimes people make mistakes on the banking side or even from the applicant side, but within a cloud environment, you can always have that safeguard to make sure that somebody's not getting themselves into trouble as well, okay? So once that data is there, once it's connected, what do we do? It's all about behavior analysis, okay? So one of the universities we work with is Leeds University. They have a fintech or a financial innovation research center, one of the leading ones in the UK. So what we do is we want to take those lines of data and we want to find patterns of behavior that are high risk, okay? And from that HPC application, we can actually start building those behavior profiles and work in line with the bank's marketing, the bank's sales, the bank, whole customer ethos. So what do we do? How do we do that? I'm going to be very simplistic here. You've got bad customers and you're going to have obviously good customers. On the bad customers, and again, these are very general, but the idea is that you should be able to segment it in such a way that it's down to the individual detail, right? So down to the detail. And don't forget, a bad customer can become a good customer. Okay, if you look at finance, I know with myself, with finance, it's boring, right? When you have to apply for a loan or insurance, you might do it once or twice in a year, but people switch off. If the bank can provide, I think, again, as Hassan, I'm quoting a lot of Hassan today. Hassan basically said, obviously, with the financial advisor being an AI assistant, this is where on the loan application is what we want to provide. Is the loan at day one efficient? And then is this loan at day 60 efficient? With AI, you can keep doing that check over and over. Is that person okay? Is that person's banking transactions in line with their loan application, right? So things like that can be automated. So a bad customer can become a good customer because you can advise them and say, look, we think, there's a few things. Is everything okay? Just having those checks as well is important. In the UK, it's by law, loans have to have a monthly check to make sure that the person is not vulnerable or there's not some other issue. So that's part of the system we think would work under AI. And so from the loan processing for AI, this is a rough calculation. Obviously, we would need the banks to confirm this. We think there's roughly a 20-hour loan application process. And then you've got a cost of 20 reals per hour. And we're talking about 8 hours on in general in terms of processing. So if you have 2,000 applications in a quarter, obviously there's more than that. This is the type of human employment cost that you will have. And then we think even a small saving, you're going to be making, even a big saving using AI, the system should pay for itself. Okay, these are the types of calculations we will work with you in each bank to make sure whatever you're doing, there's an ROI behind it. Okay, that's how we intend to have a commercial partnership with anyone, and like I said, through ODP. So this is the ask. Yeah, would you be able to give us data? If you give us historical data, then we can work with you and create a trial. From that trial, we can then show you this is what information we've created out. These are the outcomes, and this is the saving you can make. So again, looking at some of the information here, Royal Oman Police data, is that data available? Our utility bill payments tracks. We're not saying you need all of this data, but some of this would help. Yeah, whatever the banks have and what else we can do. And again, you can layer it. So you don't necessarily have to have all this data for every applicant, but once somebody doesn't make their first payment, does that trigger a request for more data, right? So those automations can be done as well, okay? So this is basically our methodology for the trial, okay? But this is roughly, again, I'll send you this. You make the business case requirements, and then these four circles are basically just us doing modeling, okay, sorting out the data, modeling, and working with the bank people as well, right? We want to work with the operations, we want to work with the IT as well. We'll help with data and regulation. The buzzer's going, the data and regulation as well. And there you go. Last finish, Vivindra, is basically through Oman Data Park we will work on this. We will work with this with you as well. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. You're mute. You're on mute.
Shows that we are live. Fantastic. Thank you, Raj, for that. We hope the knowledge shared will enable the banks in Oman to use AI to speed up their loan processing. And with that, we shall take a short break. But before that, do we have any questions from the audience? I can give a minute or two to see if there's any question. Please remember, you can ask a question on screen or you can type it out as you wish. If you'd like to get on screen, just raise your hand and then I'll bring you back like I did for Khalid. And if not, well, we thank you for your attention, and we shall be back again at the end of the session for a full session of question and answers. And stand by, our next session will be applied AI for fraud prevention and detection. So please stay online for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.